So we've looked at how to connect a data source from Smartsheet to Power BI. And I did a very simple table grabbing a couple of columns from my data source that showed a list of the consultants that work, that are part of this data set and the emails associated with those consultants. Also, just as a caveat, these are the names of some of my colleagues, but all the rest of the, here at Echo Consulting, all the rest of the data from this data set is dummy data. So just so you know. Now, this is information that's a pretty straightforward table. If I'd like to see something that's going to have, a little bit more interesting pieces to it, something that's going to make more sense to show in a graphical form, I might want to add, let me just use my sliders to reduce the size of this table a little bit. There we go. And now I'm going to click in my white space and just pick another visual to add. This time I want to try a bar chart, what they call a cluster bar chart. And there's a couple of types here. There's a stacked bar chart, a horizontal one versus a clustered, and a stacked column chart versus a clustered column chart, and there's even some other variations on that, but it's often easiest to start with the clustered bar chart until you figure out what else you might want to add. So now I can see it's asking me for what would I like to show along my y-axis versus what would I like to show along my x-axis. And I think I would still like to show my consultants along my y-axis. Nothing's really going to show up yet because it doesn't know what else it needs. But I would also like to show, I'd like to show projects in relation to consultants. How many projects does each consultant have? So I've got a column here for project, a column here for project name. I might need to check which one I actually want to use. I'm pretty sure in this case from the data set it's project name. And if you know your data well enough to be able to just put these in, one of the really nice things Power BI does is make a guess on what you might actually be wanting to look at. It's like, okay, you have some consultants. Your consultants each had a number of project names associated with them in your data set. So we're going to try the count. I'm going to show by consultant how many projects they actually have associated with their name in your data set. And in this case, that's great. That's exactly what I wanted to see, but I didn't have to do any calculation. I didn't have to do anything except match the consultant column and to the y-axis and the project name to the x-axis, which is a really nice, one of the nice things that Power BI helps you figure out. Now, as I'm looking at this, I can start to make this chart look a little bit prettier. There's a lot of options. This button here is where you're figuring out exactly what data to put in. The second button, the formatting your visual, is where you can adjust how it looks. So when I look at my y-axis, there's a label here for consultant. I don't think I really need that title, so the title goes away. I know what that is. Same for down here, the count. I don't really need that title count of project name down on the x-axis, so I'm going to expand the x-axis and just turn the title off. However, I would like to see the actual number associated with this bar. If I hover over it right now, I get a tooltip. I get this, who the consultant is and the count of projects, but I actually like to show the numbers. So if I click on this part, which says values, I don't need to display any particular units. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry, and that's a common mistake to make. I believe I was adjusting the y-axis, and let's see what that does. Oh, that's the values here. Oh, okay. I was adjusting just the values along the right, and this is a very normal thing to do in Power BI that you often have to click on a few things to figure out which piece affects what you need. I actually want what's called the data labels. There we go. So when I turn the data labels on, now I can see these numbers of Kelly has 22 projects. There's 18 projects that the name is blank. There's not a consultant associated with them. Lisa has 16, and so on. Even within the data labels, there's a lot of options. I can have the numbers show up. This is doing an auto, just making a guess where I'd like the number to show up, but I can choose to have it show up in the center of the bar, the same way it was before on the outside. And I kind of like it in the center of the bar, so I'll do that. I also would like to adjust the bars themselves a little bit. That bright blue, I don't love that color. So I'm going to change the color of the bars for now to this darker blue to look a little more sophisticated. And I would also like to adjust the actual title of this visual. That's going to be in this general pane. And rather than this automatic title that was generated, I'm going to just reduce it a little bit, projects per consultant. And now I've got a new title here. I'm also going to get a little background on my title bar so it stands out a bit. Let's make it centered. And how about making the text bold so that it shows up a little bit more. And I'll expand that just a bit more. I'm liking how that looks, so I'm going to click Save. So taking a look at what I've got with my visuals so far, I have this table right here, I've got a chart, and actually there's something on the table that looks a little bit off to me. I've got some blanks up here. This is where you could go back and check, your original data set, obviously, but you also have the option to add some filters. I'm thinking there must be something going on where there's some blanks, nobody's assigned to a particular project, but it's still part of the data set, as well as a blank where there's not a consultant name. So for now, I want to get rid of all of those blanks. And if I open up this filters pane, it's going to show you the data the columns that are being used on this visual already, the assigned to and the consultant. I'm going to do a drop down for the consultant. There's this basic filtering option. Right now it's showing everything. I'm going to unselect the blanks. And look, on the table, the blanks are no longer showing. Now that's obviously, it's not doing anything to your underlying data set. It's just a filter for the purposes of this visual. I'm going to click on my other chart here where actually the same thing is happening. It's showing blanks. And I don't want to show that for this visual right now. I'm going to do the same thing. So on this visual, it's showing the filters, showing all fields for consultant. I'm going to select all, but then unselect the blanks. And now I've got a consultant name associated with every column. Something else I would like to show is I'd like to look at not just the projects per consultant, but the projects per client. So we can maybe see something interesting in the data from that. I can actually select this visual. It may end up being a similar visual, another bar chart for clients. So I'm just going to select this one and do Control C, click the white space, Control V, and bring over this visual, and it will use the same formatting that I've already set up, obviously, the same colors and everything, and I can just switch around the data rather than having to redo the formatting that I already did. So now looking back at this new visual, I didn't want to show the consultants, so I'm just going to X out of the consultants here on the y-axis. I'm going to find the client column on my data set and just drag it to the y-axis and see what that looks like. All right, so it is another bar chart, but this one's looking a little weird because it looks like there's a whole lot of client names that are only associated with one project, which means I'm going to get this crazy long bar chart, which is maybe not the most useful view. There's a couple of things when you get something looking kind of weird that you might want to do. The first thing I'm going to do is actually refresh my data sources. Sometimes between the time you've connected to the data source and when you're actually doing the visuals, something has changed. And in this case, I do know that something had changed, and I can see this number did adjust a little bit. So that's one thing to always check, is that you actually have refreshed and are using the most recent version of your data. The other thing, if I'm thinking about it and actually take a look at my data in the table view, I'm wondering if this actually shows, yes it does. When I look here at my status column, this data set is currently showing not just my active projects, it's showing my projects that are also complete. And it would be more useful to me to filter out the complete projects right now. Maybe we do those in a different visual or a different report, But really what I was trying to show on these visuals was current active projects. So I'm going to add that filter to this visual and see what the chart looks like after that. See if we need to think about using any other options. So the first thing to check is that I've got the right visual selected, which I do. I can see this selected. Open up my filters again. And right now it's showing just the columns that are actually on this filter. I want to add an additional filter from my data set. So I'll open up my data pane, and I'm going to drag the status column here over to the filter options on this visual. And now I can see there's quite a lot of statuses. I do not want to show projects that have been canceled, projects that are complete, projects that are not signed, projects that are on hold, or projects that are only in the signed phase but aren't actually active yet. Great, so that's changed our visual just a bit. Now we have a much shorter list of clients. This is definitely a bit more useful since I'm trying to focus on the projects that are actually active right now. And I realize I need to add the same filter back to my previous visual because these numbers are going to look quite different. So I'll just do the same thing. Click on this visual, open up the filters pane, and then drag and drop my status filter over here. Select all, but then I don't need canceled, complete, not signed, on hold, or signed. So now I've got the same filter actually applying to both of these tables. Got to adjust a couple other things on the second visual. One of them right at the top, I need to change the title. So that's going to be on your Format button, General pane, Title. Rather than Projects per Consultant, this is going to be Projects per Client. But now I can see this is actually looking like a pretty useful table to me. I've got a couple of clients that I've had more than the bulk. Highest number of clients are just one project, but I've got several that have more than one project. The nice thing now, you've got these three different visuals, but they're all coming from the same data set, and they are all going to be able to maintain the connections with the data set that you would expect. Power BI has some automatic filtering options on the visuals themselves, which are pretty cool. So now, if I come up to this table and click my consultant Barb, it will actually give me a little visual filter of the things associated with that consultant Barb in these charts. So here's Barb's one project, and it's with this client ISTM. If I click around, the visual will adjust. Here's Kiefer, 3 projects, and here's the actual clients where those show up, which is a pretty cool functionality. You do need to click in the white space on the visual to default back to all selected. So if it's looking a little funny, make sure you just unselect by clicking in the white space on a visual. It works the same way on the charts themselves. I'd like to see for open lane, click on the bar for open lane. These are the consultants working on open lane's projects. It's showing me both the visual form and the table form. Same for just my one code how, that's Kiefer's project, and that's showing up here. So that's a pretty cool functionality with these visuals that you don't have to do anything to format as long as you're using columns that relate to each other from the same data set on different visuals. Power BI is able to do that on its own. One final thing that can be interesting, once you have a visual configured like this, you might want to click on a few of the other formatting options just to see if something looks a little more useful to you or better. One thing I think of is on my projects per consultant, this is an interesting bar graph, and I could show some other options, but I'd like to see what that looks like on a pie chart. Power BI will take its best guess as to how to configure this pie chart the same way it did otherwise, and it just is carrying over the same columns you put in the previous visual. And in this case, it did a pretty good job guessing. I was like, yeah, that actually is what I wanted to see. I've got the color coding per consultant, same filtering capability. When I click on a slice of the pie, it filters my other visuals to show what I selected, and then I click in the white space to show it. In this case, I would like to only see the percentages for the slices. So I'm going to come to Format Your Visual. Here's a section for slices and detail labels. On this label, I would like to only show the percent of the total, so that pie chart is not so messy. I could even choose a different color per person. I really don't like this pink all that much, so I click on the color for the pink and switch it to, looks like there's already a purple, how about the gray? So down to that level, you can configure each of these visuals however you need to. The last part I'll do, I don't love this consultant list being on the right side. That's essentially the legend for this pie chart. So I'll open up legend, and I'm going to position this in the top right so that I see that right away. So we've configured 3 different visuals in Power BI, all coming from the same data set, and because they're using some of the same columns, they actually relate to each other and have some automatic filtering capability just by making them this way within Power BI. If you really like how this looks and want to share it out with other folks who aren't going to have this kind of access to Power BI, or you would like to have something in essentially a published version, you're going to use this Publish button right here. Get prompted to save. And I'll save it as test demo table in my workspace, which will be there. And now it's going to ask you where you want to publish within your Power BI, and this is referring to your Power BI Online. So I'm just going to select my workspace for now. It may take it a little bit to publish, and then it will give you the option to open that report in Power BI. It opened up a separate window for me, but I'm dragging it over to show you. And now I can see a dashboard view of that report I built, or that view that I built in Power BI. It's still going to have that filtering capability we talked about, where you click on a slice of the pie and the report gives you the highlight of what you selected, or you select someone from the chart and it will highlight the appropriate person, and you click into the white. And it will show you essentially just for someone's information what the filters are, and have the option to apply a filter from this view to the report. So in this case, I'd like to only see Kelly's, and that's another way that a person viewing your report could add a filter. Putting a filter here in the online version is not going to have any effect on the file that you're working out of from your desktop Power BI. However, if this view is even a little more than you want people to see, you want a truly published dashboard, the way you're going to do that is the File drop down here on the left, click on the Embed Report, and use one of these options. We often use the Publish to Web, which is actually going to give you a link or an embed code. I'll give you the warning about putting those things. And then you have, I've only got one tab on this report, so that's not a section that you need. And then you have a link that you can share with folks via email, or even put it as an iframe into a website or another dashboard view. I'll show you what this looks like. Just open up another tab. Here's the link that I just copied. And here again is the view. I still see this same view. I can zoom out. I have the limited interactivity where I can just click on the visuals themselves and then click in the white space, but I don't have that filter pane on the right side where I could add a filter to the entire page the way I do from the Power BI Online. There's a lot of other things you can do with these. You can make them look even prettier, add titles, add headers. add other linkages to even have a tabbed report where you had different pages and different tabs. We'll probably do some future videos on those as well. But thanks very much for following along. We looked at how to connect a Smartsheet data source to Power BI and make some custom visuals and publish those into a dashboard that anyone can get the link to and do some limited interactivity with. Thank you.